Hi, this is Kaylee with another ribald romp through the Caffieri library exclusively for our Patreon supporters. Did you miss me? So sit back or lie back and let's let Lauren McAllister tell us about the power of a woman's needs. Today's incredible erotic chronicle is entitled, I Just Can't Stop Fucking His Friends. You know when you're in class and the airflow in the room starts frolicking along the inside of your legs and up your skirt, and you decide to go to the girls' room for a quick wank? Well, that happened to me constantly during my last year of high school. Perhaps if I'd been wearing underwear, it might have created an effective cottony anti-frolic barrier. Alas, I rarely wore such pussy/breeze protection, and my tender loins were now bearing the brunt of this tingly assault. Plus, being the proud owner of a new Brazilian, I'd been diddling my newly bald twat to the point where my fingers couldn't hold a pen anymore. There was just something about those smooth, puffy rolls of skin down there that had me turned into a psychotic clit-clobbering fiend. So off I went in search of sensual succor. Unfortunately, when I got to the bathroom, it was being cleaned. As much as I liked our school janitor, I didn't really feel like whacking the crack in front of him, so I headed out to my girlfriend's car. Yes, I could have just gone back to class, but I was really in the mood. On the way to the parking lot, the feel of my air-tickled legs brushing against one another was almost making me dizzy. As soon as I hit daylight, I excitedly quick-stepped my squelching genitals over to Carissa's Chevy. Fuck! There was someone in the car next to hers. It turned out to be Danny Smith, and he had this weird expression on his face. He had his eyes closed and appeared to be in an epic amount of pain. Then he started to have a seizure. I was quite concerned for him until I realised that he was just tugging one out. Wow, quite the show. That's when he opened up his peepers and saw me staring at him. His eyes became the size of frightened frisbees and he went whiter than the surviving winter brother. I absolutely fucking freaked and tore back into the school unself-abused. For the rest of the day, I was kind of traumatized, but after I got home, I had a couple of calming wanks, and then I got to thinking about seeing Danny squeezing one out of his mustard dispenser. I almost started to feel bad for the poor guy. He was one of those boys who you don't really think much about until you catch him jerking off in a car, that is. High school must have been tough for someone like him. I mean, just because girls are completely indifferent to you doesn't mean you don't like girls. Quite the opposite. And it doesn't mean that you don't require a little self-relief now and again. When you're a girl, you have guys offering you their penises all day long, but pussies tend to be a heck of a lot pickier than their do-wanger brethren. In fact, I've probably had sex with way more girls at my school than most of the guys. See, us straightish ladies get to play with each other whenever we're in the mood and there's no worthy male talent available. But poor lonely straight boys just do not seem inclined to cornhole each other when they lack sufficient female company. Damn them. Whenever I've done the threesome, I haven't even managed to coax my two naked companions to suck each other's dicks. Not for lack of trying. I think that would be so hot. So, as I say, I was feeling suitably bad for Dan, the lonely man. When I saw him in physics class the next morning, he looked like he wanted to commit harakiri with his Bunsen burner. This situation couldn't go on. I slipped him a note to meet me in the parking lot behind the dumpster at noon. He was there on the dot. It's amazing how punctual boys can be when they're scared shitless about something. Hi, he half murmured. You wanted to see me? Danny put his hands into his pockets and stared at the ground right in front of his shoes. This is obviously about what happened yesterday, I replied. He went a whiter shade of pale than even Procol Harum could have imagined. I haven't told anyone about what I saw. A nanoparticle of pink came back into his complexion, though he still hadn't looked me in the eye. Yet, this startled him a little. I don't know what made me do it. Perhaps I just sensed something in him, some buried need to be punished for his sins. My mood became dark and my voice became more threatening. Show me your cock, I demanded. Now he looked up at me. What? You heard me. I said I haven't told anyone about that disgusting pervo act you were doing in that car, and I won't, as long as you do exactly what I say. I became strangely aroused by the horrified look on his face. You didn't need to be Dr. Phil to recognize that he really didn't want to show me his wiener. Or did he? Well, I sneered like an evil prison warden. Danny nervously and very slowly undid his belt and began to unzip his trousers. I watched the whole procedure with an unamused glower. Down went the jeans, and there it was. His penis was an okay enough size, considering it was as soft as a dead bird. Lift it up, so I can see your balls better, I ordered. Danny complied, but looked on the verge of tears. A little girly nectar started to dribble down my inner thigh. I want to see how big it is hard. Play with it. He looked at me pleadingly. You do want your carjacking to continue to be our little secret, don't you? Threatened the Dark Lord. He began to reluctantly and shyly, he was so cute, manipulate his joystick. Danny had one of those foreskin thingies that he pulled on and off the head of his cock. I thought to myself, interesting. I actually like watching a guy jerk it. Keep going, I encouraged. The only witnesses to you being a very naughty boy are me and the dumpster rats. He continued to knead his knob, but with very little enthusiasm. You know, you might want to swap on that with a little more enthusiasm, or we're going to be out here all day. I pulled up my top and gave him a nice view of my tits. This seemed to loosen him up a bit. With a laser-focused stare aimed at my jugs, Dan began to whap away with a little more urgency. His nards were bouncing up and down like little bingo balls in that weird glass sphere. His knees were clanging together like a one-man band mechanical monkey, and then his eyes slammed shut like he'd been pepper sprayed by the NYPD during a peaceful demonstration. I may not have seen a guy spank it before, but I certainly know when a gentleman is about to pop. Bingo! His hot spunk shot out of him in thick, powerful spurts, which rose up and then plummeted onto the tarmac, forming archipelagos of white splotches on the smooth black surface. Danny twitched and grunted as he squeezed the last drops of cum out of his well-pounded pud. My snatch had turned into a soup tureen, but I kept up my charade of being a hard ass. When Dan had recovered his breath, he just stood there, with his dick in hand, awaiting my further instructions. This was so hot. I scowled and took a Kleenex out of my purse. Here, you'd better wipe that jizz off your palm before you go back to class. Once you've done that, you can pull your pants back up. He nodded his head obediently. I told him to meet me at the same place tomorrow and then sent him on his way. Me? I skipped my other classes and toddled off home to pound the plum. I lingered with my fingers until my vulva was too sore for contact. My nipples received so much abuse, I had to put plasters over them in the morning before I could get my bra back on. The next afternoon, I ordered Danny to deposit his mung into my palm. It was so cool feeling the head of his penis in my hand while vast pools of creamy splooge blooped out of him. Again, he waited, dick in hand, for permission to get dressed. I dipped the end of my finger in his fist fluid and sampled it. You've been drinking too much coffee, I scolded him. Only water for you tonight. I want this to taste like Bavarian cream tomorrow. Got that? Danny nodded, not even questioning that there was going to be another performance the next day. I took another small dollop of the viscous liquid and dabbed it on the tip of his nose. This is a reminder that you've been a very, very bad boy, and I don't want you to remove it until you get back to your locker. Do you understand me? Dan nodded his head again. I was really starting to cotton to this dominatrix shtick. Now, put that ugly thing away and leave me in peace. This pathetic schlub did everything I commanded without question. I came to realize that he was actually enjoying the abuse. I was in heaven. Well, I would have been if my poor twat was a little more durable. That night I only managed 2 exceedingly gentle jousts before having to call it a night. The next day, I made him come into some bread. Once he'd contributed to my sandwich, I folded the slice in 2 and took a big bite. "Eat this," I ordered, holding out the remainder of the meal that he contributed to. Danny did not look like he was going to do it. "Come on, you little suck shit," I snarled, opening up the bread. "There's only the tiniest strip of your semen in there." I shoved it against his lips. "I said eat it." To my surprise, he opened up his mouth and took it in. I'd actually made a guy eat his own cum. This was so incredibly hot, I wondered if I could rent some other girl's vagina for the evening. This called for some major finger fucking, and my labia were absolutely shot. Over the next couple of weeks, I just got more and more demanding. Danny was made to wear my underwear, shave his nutsack, ejaculate into his own gym bag and outside my bedroom window. The meaner I was to him, the more creamy goo came spewing out of that hand crank of his. Occasionally, the humiliation would become too much and he'd start to cry. I'd sympathetically pat him on the head and say that I'd try and be a little less wicked to him tomorrow, but he knew I was lying. Eventually, I started to have actual feelings for Danny. I even asked him out on a date. He was quite shocked. Then, I told him to invite his best friend to come with us. When they pulled up to my house, Frank was just about as ordinary looking a dude as Dan. I hopped in the back seat with Danny's buddy and gave him a huge soul kiss and an affectionate little nut squeeze. At the movie, I necked with Frank throughout the entire thing, and then ordered my date to drive us out into the country so I could fuck his pal. I got Frank to do me in the back seat of Dan's car while Dan stood watch. Frank was definitely a bit of a newbie when it came to fornication. He spent most of the event flopping around on top of me like an epileptic trout. My date just stood there looking like he'd been diagnosed with inoperable colon cancer. The sadness on his face got my clit screaming like a fire alarm. When I began to feel Frankie on the verge of coming, I called out to Danny to fondle his buddy's nuts so I got every last drop of his sludge inside me. I wasn't sure whether he would obey, but he did, and thus guaranteed himself a second date. All Dan got at the door was a peck on the cheek, but I did tell him what a great fuck his friend Frankie was. I reached under my skirt and pulled my hand back out. Look, his cum is still dripping out of me. All our romantic rendezvous were just like this. I fucked every friend and acquaintance Danny had, and then all my pathetic swain would get was a small air kiss at the end of each humiliating, unsatisfying evening, as long as he fondled their balls while they were coming inside me, that is. Time moved on, and we eventually got married. How's that for crazy? I picked up some guy at the reception to join us in our hotel room for our wedding night. First, Dan took off my clothes in front of the stranger, and then I made him take the guy's clothes off. His name was Mike, I think. I knew exactly what I wanted as my honeymoon gift, and I had my whole wedding night scenario intricately mapped out. My new hubby stripped off and lay in the bed, and I plopped down on top of him in the 69 position. This was the first time he'd ever been close to my snatch. Enjoy it while you can, buddy. I roughly pushed his meat stick away from my face as Danny proceeded to lick my clit and inner lips. This was to loosen me up for a real man's cock. If he pleased me, I'd give the end of his knob a small kiss, but if he did something wrong, I would slap his balls. Mike then climbed onto the mattress and began to stuff his cock inside me. The head of his dick was practically touching the tip of Danny's tongue. I moaned like a lonesome wind as Mike started to pump away inside my fuckhole. The thought of those hairy nuts smashing against Dan's forehead and eye sockets had me as wet as a Cornish holiday. The idea of Mike's shaft, full of cunt dew, sliding back and forth across Danny's helpless face, drove me completely bonkers. I was so turned on, I actually spent a couple seconds sucking my humiliated hubby's schlong before I felt myself clench around Mikey's gargantuan goo gun. From then on, it was all about me. I pushed my honeypot downwards so Dan's face got as much cock-bashing as possible. There is absolutely no closer view a husband can get of another man fucking his wife. A subatomic surge started to build inside me, and my clit expanded to the size of a weather balloon. I bit into Danny's ballsack skin as a humongous orgasmic explosion almost blew me off the bed. Writhing and twitching and climaxing like a drunken sailor, I squirted my girly cum all over my new hubby's forehead and cheeks. Mike was now revving up for his big spunk dump. His thrusts became absolutely maniacal as he got closer to ignition. I thought he was going to break poor Danny's nose. Mike's pelvic heaves were so violent. Pow! I came again, just as Mike shot a bucket load of sizzling jizz into my love trench. Over and over, he smashed his cock against my cervix to rid himself of every last drop of his glorious wriggling seed. When he was done, Mike retracted his spent splattercaster and quickly grabbed the video camera for a close-up. I remained on top of Danny and started to contract my twat. "It's coming out," I was informed. The squeeze was so sweet, knowing I was pushing Mike's sticky ooze out of my cunt. It was sliding down my pussy lips and dripping into my husband's open mouth. "Drink it for me, baby," I called out. "Mommy wants to watch you drink all of Mikey's cum." When I had finished emptying myself out onto his tonsils, I let him go ejaculate off the hotel balcony while I snuggled up in bed with my one-night stand. My blushing groom slept naked on the floor with no blanket as I drifted off to blissful sleep to the sound of his humiliated sobs. In the morning, I made Danny feed us breakfast and then jerk off into the toilet while I filmed it. Our honeymoon was exhausting. I'd never had so much sex in my life. When we got home, Dan would do the dusting and the cleaning while I'd wank myself speechless watching those videos of me fucking other men. Of course, I made him watch the creamy emissions drizzling onto his outstretched tongue. I swear, he went whiter than the sperm he was swallowing on screen. Just so there's no misunderstanding, Danny isn't the slightest bit gay. I see the excruciating longing and desire that he has for me. But if I gave it to him, then that longing would go away, wouldn't it? And as long as he feels unworthy, he'll put up with anything and be mine forever. We've been married for over a year now. The house is immaculate, and I still haven't let him inside me. I like to invite my girlfriends over. We get drunk and have a competition to see who can think of the most humiliating object to have him whack off into. The blender was a pretty fun one. What a fucking mess. Those nights, a couple of the hornier girls usually stay over, and Danny sleeps on the porch. On his birthday, I'm thinking of inviting Frankie over and forcing them to suck each other's cocks. I just think that would be so hot. The end. Well, my wonderful Patreon ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back again next week with another brand new and exclusive tale from the Caffieri Library. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I'm always interested. And if you get lonely in the meantime, you can always watch this video again.